Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a stack of sources and drilling down into what might be one of the most ambitious social experiments in modern business history.
It's a fascinating story. We're looking at this grand convergence,
Right,
right?
exactly. What happens when a massive global food company, with all its R&D and marketing power.
Meets a Nobel Prize winning microfinance visionary.
Yeah.
It's just a collision of two completely different worlds.
And the setting is so important for this. We have to understand the stakes. We're talking Bangladesh mid-2000s.
Right, where something like 40% of the population was below the poverty line. But it wasn't just the visible poverty. There was this silent public health emergency going on.
That's the phrase that just jumped out at me from the research, hidden hunger.
Hmm.
It's not just about a lack of calories, it's a dietary deficiency so profound it literally starves the brain and body. We're talking about 9.5 million children who are missing critical micronutrients.
Iron, vitamin A, iodine, the absolute essentials for development. And without them, you get stunting. You get long-term cognitive impairment. It's a barrier to human potential.
And this is the exact problem that attracted Professor Muhammad Yunus, the founder of the Grameen Bank.
Right, the Nobel laureate. And he wasn't looking for another charity. He wanted a totally new model. He called it the social business.
A company designed from the ground up to be financially self-sustaining, but, and this is the key, operating strictly not for profit.
That is just such a radical distinction. In a normal company, any surplus, any profit, it goes to the shareholder.
As dividends, yeah.
But in a social business, 100% of that surplus gets reinvested. It goes right back into expanding the social goal.
So you're not measuring success in dollars. You're measuring it in, what, lives improved.
Exactly. And the stage for this massive experiment was set in 2005. Yunus has a meeting with Franck Rabou.
The CEO of Danone, the huge French dairy company.
An unlikely partnership, to say the least. But it led, just a year later in 2006, to the creation of Grameen Danone Foods Limited, GDFL.
And GDFL was totally groundbreaking. I mean, it was the world's first consciously designed 50-50 social business joint venture like this.
And their mission was, on the surface, very straightforward. Two parts. First, make an affordable, fortified food to fight child malnutrition.
And second, create jobs for the poor while doing it. An inclusive supply chain from start to finish.
So our mission today is to really unpack this thing almost 2 decades on. We're going to get into the innovative model, the very serious hurdles they hit, and what this whole experiment can teach you about mixing business with social impact.
Okay, let's start with the product itself, the vehicle for this whole mission. It wasn't a program or a handout. It was a small cup of yogurt.
A simple cup of yogurt. And they zeroed in on the most damaging deficiencies in that region. Vitamin A, iron, iodine, and zinc.
These aren't minor things. I mean, they're critical for bone growth, immune function.
Brain development, everything. If a child doesn't get them early on, that damage can be permanent.
So the solution was this product called Shokti plus Loy, or Shokti Doi. It means strength yogurt.
Right.
And the specs on this were incredibly precise. Each little 60-gram cup had to pack a serious nutritional punch.
It did. That small cup was engineered to provide 30% of a child's daily requirement of those key nutrients.
Just in one serving.
In a single serving.
Yeah.
And, achieving that level of fortification without making it taste awful,
Yeah.
that was a huge technical challenge.
And that's really where Danone's corporate power came in. Because fortifying dairy with iron is, well, it's famously difficult.
It is. Iron gives food this metallic taste. It can react with other things and just ruin the product completely.
So it actually forced a breakthrough. Danone's food scientists, they worked on this for almost a year.
And they found a solution, a special microencapsulated iron compound. It was this hidden bit of technology that essentially protected the iron molecules.
So they get absorbed by the bottle, but they don't spoil the yogurt's flavor.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that this innovation, which was born out of necessity in Bangladesh, was so good that Danone later used it in its high-end products in Europe.
That's a perfect example of reverse innovation. A solution for a developing market flows back to the developed world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for cultural fit, they didn't just use sugar, they sweetened it with local date molasses, a familiar traditional flavor.
It had to be food, not medicine. Kids had to want to eat it.
And the proof was in the pudding, so to speak. The efficacy studies showed it worked. Regular consumption significantly improved hemoglobin levels. It was a functional food that actually moved the needle.
So, fantastic product. Now let's talk about the radical structure behind it, the social business model. You said GDFL is a type I social business. Break that down for us.
Right. So in a typical company, investors put in money and they expect dividends, a return on that money.
Of course.
In a type I social business, the investors, Danone and Grameen in this case, they can get their initial investment back, your principal. But that's it.
No dividends, ever.
Never. The shareholders are basically accepting a zero return investment. It's patient capital. The social return is the reward.
Their ROI is the impact.
Precisely. Their success metric is the number of children saved from malnutrition. And because they're not chasing profits, they can pursue their second pillar, affordable pricing.
Which had to be just razor thin. Initially, that 60-gram cup was priced at only 5 BDT.
Which, to give you some perspective, was about 7 US cents, the cost of a handful of lentils in the local market.
That is an incredibly delicate balancing act. You're trying to serve the poorest of the poor, but you're also running a modern food facility.
With refrigeration, quality control, expensive ingredients like fresh milk, it's tough.
And the sources really highlight this first major crisis around 2008. The global price of milk just doubled.
It was a massive shock. For a company on those margins, it was devastating. They had no choice but to raise the price.
And what happened?
Sales just plummeted among their target rural customers. They're extremely price sensitive.
Which forced a really clever but also complicated adaptation, the cross-subsidy approach.
Right. To keep the price in the villages low, it eventually settled around 10 BDT. They had to start selling a larger 80-gram version in wealthy city markets.
So you'd find a small subsidized cup in a village, but then in Dhaka, you'd find a bigger, more expensive version for maybe 35 BDT.
Exactly. The high margins from urban consumers became the engine that supported the rural mission.
It's a smart solution, but you can already see the tension it creates in the mission.
We'll definitely come back to that. But first, let's look at production, the factory itself.
Yeah, they didn't build a typical sprawling Danone plant. They built one small-scale factory in a town called Bogra. It was only 600 square meters.
To put that in perspective, that's maybe the size of a large coffee shop. A normal Danone plant could be 100 times bigger.
And that small size was completely intentional. They used a simplified, very labor-intensive process, minimal automation.
And that had a dual purpose. First, keep capital costs low, no expensive machinery. But second, and more importantly, maximize local job creation.
They wanted to employ people, not displace them.
Exactly. And the whole operation was designed to support the local economy. The factory gets all its fresh milk from about 500 smallholder farmers right there in the Bogra area.
Many of whom use Grameen microloans to buy their cows in the first place, so it's a complete closed loop.
A fully inclusive value chain. Which brings us to the final piece, maybe the most innovative part, distribution.
How do you get a refrigerated product to remote villages with no shops and unreliable electricity?
You leverage the Grameen network. They trained local female micro-entrepreneurs. They became known as the Grameen ladies or Shokti ladies.
And these women worked on commission, right? Earning about 1 BDT for every cup they sold.
Yep. And they weren't just sitting in a shop. They were going door to door with insulated bags. They were mobile community salespeople.
And that created this whole other layer of economic empowerment.
A huge one. They weren't just sellers. They became nutrition educators. They had to explain why this yogurt was worth the money. And this model also created stable jobs for about 117 rickshaw van pullers who delivered the yogurt every day.
With benefits like insurance, which is almost unheard of in that informal economy.
So on paper, it's this brilliant, self-contained ecosystem. Local farms, local jobs, empowered women. But, the execution was incredibly difficult.
Let's talk about that. The financial viability was a huge question mark.
It absolutely was. The truth is, GDFL operated at a loss for years. The margins were just too thin, the scale too small. When that 2008 milk price spike hit, it became a real existential threat.
And that's what forced the pivot to the cities we mentioned. They realized just selling within a 30-kilometer radius of the factory
wasn't enough volume. They just couldn't keep the lights on. They had to go where the money was.
And that's where the core mission tension really comes into focus. Because by 2010, the strategy was working financially, but 80% of their sales were coming from urban areas.
80%.
So was that pivot a necessary evil? Or was it a sign that the pure social business model just couldn't work on its own?
I think the sources suggest it was a necessary compromise. It proved that pure market mechanisms on their own probably can't reach the ultra-poor in a sustainable way.
So the company had to evolve. It became a hybrid, using urban profits to subsidize the rural mission. They eventually aimed for a mix of like 70% urban, 30% rural.
A rebalancing act.
Yeah.
But beyond the finances, you just can't overstate the logistical nightmare of the cold chain in a place like Bangladesh.
It's a huge challenge for a dairy product. You've got heat, humidity, spotty electricity.
And you have to invest so much in insulated transport and training, because if that product spoils just once, consumer trust is gone. You won't get that customer back.
The sources even said they had to stop distribution to areas like Sylhet, which is over 200 kilometers away. They just couldn't guarantee quality control.
Right. And think about the cost of that. Getting small, insulated fridges to tiny village vendors, it's a massive operational expense that pushes that low price point even further out of reach.
Okay, so let's pivot to the final scorecard, the impact. Despite all these challenges, by 2020, GDFL was reaching about 300,000 children a year.
It's not the 9.5 million who need it, no, but it's hundreds of thousands of lives being measurably improved.
And there was a ripple effect, right? The educational component actually worked.
It did. Surveys showed that 83% of consumers knew the product had added vitamins. So GDFL significantly raised general awareness about micronutrients.
And then there's the economic empowerment side, the roughly 500 local farmers who got a stable market for their milk.
That's a huge boost to their livelihoods. Plus the 250 or so Shokti ladies who gained income, respect, and skills, and the van pullers with stable wages. That localized impact is a clear, undeniable win.
Now for the critiques. We've touched on the big one, the reliance on urban sales. But what about the challenge of behavior change?
That was another massive lesson. At first, the Grameen lady sales were much lower than they'd projected.
Why was that?
Well, the assumption was, if the product is good and it's cheap, people will buy it. But mothers are, they're rightly cautious about new foods, especially when they have a tiny budget for staples like rice and lentils.
So the women couldn't just be salespeople. They had to be trained as health communicators.
Exactly. They needed sustained, costly training to explain why this yogurt was worth it, what the vitamins do, how it impacts a child's future. Creating new habits takes incredible patience and resources.
And that led to product diversification, didn't it? They moved beyond just yogurt.
They did. They realized chilled yogurt was just too hard and expensive to distribute everywhere. So they introduced things like shelf-stable fortified biscuits,
which could reach more remote areas, be eaten by the whole family, and improve the company's financial footing.
And we have to circle back to that reverse innovation point, because that might be the most lasting global impact of this whole project. Danone itself was changed by this little Bogra factory. Well, think about what a multinational engineer does. They optimize for massive scale, automation, efficiency. The Bogra factory was the complete opposite. Small, simple, labor-intensive. It broke a huge mental barrier inside Danone.
They realized they didn't need to build giant automated plants everywhere. They learned how to run a cost-effective plant with largely unskilled labor, which is a vital skill for emerging markets.
They even learned local tricks, like using certain enzymes to keep raw milk fresh longer, which they then applied in their global operations. It was a two-way street of learning.
In the end, it feels like Grameen Danone really validates the social business idea, but with a huge asterisk.
A huge one. It requires patience, flexibility, and that patient capital we talked about. This was not a quick win. It took over a decade of constant adaptation to find a stable, impactful model.
So what does this all mean for you? Grameen Danone is this pioneering hybrid. It successfully merged a multinational's expertise with a grassroots organization's reach to fight a massive social problem. It had real successes, health gains, local jobs, but it also exposed the deep structural trade-offs of serving the ultra-poor.
It shows, without a doubt, that the private sector can and should play a role in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, like zero hunger. But it also proves Muhammad Yunus's point. To really succeed here, business needs a radical redesign.
So we'll leave you with this thought to consider. GDFL proved that true success has to be measured in multiple dimensions: people, planet, and profit. If we imagine a future where companies are required to measure their success not just by financial returns, but by the tangible betterment of people's lives, how would we need to design our investment and regulatory systems to support that vision everywhere, to make the social business model the rule, not the exception?
Think about what incentives it would take to shift global capitalism towards measuring impact, not just dividends.
Thank you for listening to Mission Possible. innovating for the world's most marginalized. This podcast is built on the outstanding work of our students, whose curiosity and commitment drive much of the research and storytelling you hear. Each episode is grounded in academic research and shaped through close collaboration with our partners. To learn more about the research and partnerships behind this podcast, feel free to contact us. Thank you for joining.